Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be covering three different storms which are out in the Atlantic. We have X-Storm Danny, which is currently over Georgia, and that'll be making its way into the Ohio Valley. It'll just remain as a very weak storm, mainly just impacting with rain, but nothing in terms of winds. We'll also be talking about Invest 95L and Invest 97L. Both of them do have a fairly good chance of becoming tropical storms, and if they were to be named, they would be named Elsa or Fred, depending on which one was to actually form first. So we're going to be covering all of that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have some excessive heat warnings in effect for much of the West, as well as some red flag warnings in parts of Nevada and California. We have heat advisories for parts of the Northwest and the Northeast, with a few excessive heat warnings in parts of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. We have some excessive heat watches in eastern Montana, as well as some flood watches which go from Indiana and Illinois all the way down to New Mexico and Texas. Yesterday we had a high temperature of 126 degrees in Death Valley, California, with a low temperature 9 miles south of Albany, Wyoming, where they got down to 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest rainfall report was in Odessa, Texas, where they got 3.48 inches of rain, and there were no snowfall reports as of yesterday. Taking a look at the current 5-day outlook, you can see that we have ex-tropical storm Danny, which is again currently over Georgia. It'll be making its way through the Tennessee Valley and then up into the Ohio Valley, but it's not going to be anything really significant. We're not going to be talking about anything with winds, mainly just a bit of a rainmaker in that area. It's going to turn basically just into a frontal system that'll just, it won't have any impacts really in terms of winds, mostly just bringing 1 to 2 inches of rain. So it's not really going to be too impactful in terms of winds, mainly just a rainmaker in those areas. And then we have two areas to watch. We have a new area that they just added, which is down here. That one has a fairly low chance of developing as of now, although I think they're kind of underestimating it. I think it does have a fairly good shot of actually developing based off what I've been seeing on the models. If we look at this first system, Invest 95L has a 30% chance of developing within the next 48 hours and a 40% chance within the next 5 days. And then if we look at that other system further to the south, which is Invest 97L, you can see that within the next 2 days it has a 10% chance of development, and within the next 5 days it has a 20% chance of development. You can see they're pretty much overlapping in where they're gonna go through. This yellow area, Invest 97L, has a better shot of becoming a stronger storm or even becoming a hurricane, because it will be moving to the south of the Caribbean islands into a much more favorable water body, and because of that it does have a higher chance of developing into a bigger storm. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in today's video. These also could be two record-breaking storms for the earliest formation of the E and F storms. So the previous records were on July 6th and July 9th of last year. So we broke this record last year, and now we potentially could break it this year. Both of these storms are expected to become tropical storms within the next 5 days. So either way, we look to break this record. And then even if you look at the G storm down at that 7th place right there, that's the next data formation, or the next record was July 22nd from last year. So we could potentially break that as well, considering that if we break the E and F records, the G record still is 20 plus days away from that. So we still have pretty much 3 weeks to get at least one more named storm. So we're on track to have close to a record-breaking season at least. We're at least matching or even a little bit better than last year, which was a record-breaking year. So we'll have to see how this continues to play out. It looks like it is a fairly active start to the season. Whether that continues through July, August, September, and even through November is still the main question here. Looking at the remnants of Tropical Storm Danny, which is currently in Georgia. It's located at 32.9 degrees north by 82.7 degrees west. Maximum winds of 20 knots or 23 miles per hour. Minimum pressure of 1,019 millibars with a radius of circulation around 60 nautical miles. Located 109 miles northwest of Savannah, Georgia, 114 miles southeast of Atlanta, Georgia, and about 122 miles southwest of Columbia, South Carolina, as of the last update at 8 a.m. Eastern time. If we look at the satellite imagery of this, you can see it's mostly just a blob of mainly just thunderstorm activity. It's again nothing that looks too tropical right now. It had some tropical elements back when it was over the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, but as soon as it headed inland and as soon as it started to make that trek further northwest, it really lost most of those tropical characteristics. And right now we're just looking at a pretty much a glorified thunderstorm at this point. It's not really too strong. If you were to look at this from a tropical standpoint, again, it's just a rainmaker with potentially a bit of thunder and lightning here and there. So again, nothing that's going to be too severe or noteworthy with this particular storm. Taking a look at the key messages, and the first and only key message from the National Hurricane Center is just saying that heavy rainfall from the remnants of Danny may produce isolated flash flooding, especially in urban areas across western and northern Georgia into central and northern Alabama today. So again, they're only talking about the rain threat with this. We're not expecting a lot in terms of the winds. In fact, the winds, again, are very, very low. I believe they're gusting to around 30 miles per hour or 25 miles per hour. So again, very weak winds, and mostly it's just a rain threat in these areas. And if we look at the past tropical storm force wind map, you can see that it was over a very small area which actually had those tropical storm force winds over southern South Carolina and eastern Georgia. So either way, this wasn't really too impactful even when it was a developed storm, and now that it isn't, it's much less impactful. So even though you're hearing that a tropical storm made landfall with South Carolina, there really were very little impacts with this storm, and I was actually very surprised that they even named it, considering how small of a system this was. Looking at the forecasted track of this, it's expected to head into the Tennessee Valley and then eventually into the Ohio Valley and then potentially out through the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, but again, nothing in terms of tropical impacts from this storm. Invest 95L, which could potentially become a tropical storm Elsa or Fred, depending on which of these two systems develops first. It's located at 12.3 degrees north by 48.9 degrees west. Maximum winds of 30 knots or 34 miles per hour. Minimum pressure of 1,013 millibars and radius of circulation around 120 nautical miles. Located 713 miles east of Barbados and about 574 miles northeast of Brazil at this point. So it is still fairly far away from the Caribbean islands and the Lesser Antilles, but it is getting closer every single day. So we are getting closer to this event actually becoming impactful over those regions. And it looks like this could become a tropical storm within the next couple of days here. If we look at the satellite imagery, you can see that it is actually starting to develop quite nicely. It is going over an area with minimal amounts of Saharan dust. So we do have some Saharan dust within this area, but it isn't too impactful in this on this storm, just because the amount of Saharan dust is actually quite low for these areas. The bigger impact is going to be an area of wind shear, which is just sitting up over this area. So we have a bunch of wind shear in this area. If it can move through there, and if it could somehow come out on the other side of this still somewhat intact, then this does have a good chance of maybe becoming another, or of redeveloping into another tropical storm, or maybe even becoming a low end category 1. But again, we still are probably around 5 to 7 days out from that actually happening, and it is going to still be heavily dependent on whether this can move through that area of wind shear or whether it just kind of breaks apart as it moves through that region. Taking a look at the current track guidance, you can see that it's expected to move into the Lesser Antilles and near Barbados, and then move through the Dominican Republic or Haiti, depending on where exactly it tracks, and then again move up through the Bahamas, and then probably curve out to sea somewhat like this. So it should impact much of the Caribbean, but it shouldn't have too many land impacts for the U.S., although that is still a possibility, especially in areas along the southeast coast. So keeping outside there is an outside possibility for that to happen, for this to impact the southeast coast. So just keep an eye on this over the next couple of days. Not saying that it is likely, but I would say maybe 10 or 20% chance that this does make some impact with the southeast coast. And so for that reason, we do still have to continue to watch this. If you live in the U.S. and if you live in the Caribbean, of course, you're going to want to watch this because it looks like it could be making direct impacts with a few big areas. For example, we have Barbados, which is in the path of this, the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Puerto Rico potentially could get some impacts on the northern end of this, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and then even through Cuba and the Bahamas also have the chance of getting impacted by the storm. If we look at the GFS ensemble model guidance, they're taking more of a southerly track and then curving this up through the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So we'll have to see exactly what happens. There are a couple models that just keep this to the south. If that happens, then this could become a much stronger storm because that part of the Caribbean is very favorable for development of these tropical storms. We have very warm sea surface temperatures and we have a lot of OHC, which has just not been tapped into just yet. Looking at the potential for this to become a tropical storm, the intensity guidance, almost every single model has this becoming a tropical storm. And if we look at when that may happen, it could happen as early as maybe the next 12 to 24 hours, or maybe even as late as the next 2 or 3 days. But either way, it looks like within the next 3 days, this will become a tropical storm unless something crazy happens. So we are expecting this to become our 5th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, or maybe our 6th named storm, depending on how fast Invest 97L develops. So again, this is Invest 97L, potentially could be Tropical Storm Elsa or Fred, depending on which one forms first. It's located at 8 degrees north by 43.8 degrees west, maximum winds of 25 knots, which is equivalent to 29 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,009 millibars with a radius of circulation around 120 nautical miles. Located 833 miles north-northeast of Brazil, 827 miles southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, and it's about 1,712 miles south-southeast of Barbados, but it is moving at a rather quick clip there. So looking at the satellite imagery, you can see here is Invest 95L, which is right in here, and then here's Invest 97L, which is kind of lagging behind it by a few hundred miles. It is still rather undeveloped. It is just mainly a cluster of storms at this point, but as it continues to move to the northwest, it should start to develop. And the reason that this one has the bigger potential is because most of the models have this coming south of the Caribbean islands, not making landfall until it hits potentially somewhere in the western Caribbean or even into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll have to see, because if that does happen, if it stays over water, especially over those very favorable waters in the Caribbean and potentially the Gulf of Mexico, then it has a rather good chance of becoming a stronger type of system, just because it's not interacting with as much land and it's going over very favorable and warm waters. So if that does happen, then this could be a rather strong storm. Looking at the intensity guidance with this, you can see that we have a rather high chance of this becoming a tropical storm. Pretty much every model has this becoming a tropical storm, and 3 out of the 4 models that are currently rendering in have this becoming a Category 1. And even on the end of this, you can even see that a few of these are potentially bringing this closer to Category 2 status, and who knows, we could even get near that upper part of the Category 2 status, maybe even closer to Category 3 status, depending on the exact track of this, especially if this can stay over the center of the Caribbean and just kind of stay over water instead of making landfall. That would give it the best shot of actually becoming a stronger storm. Taking a look at the track guidance from this, you can see that it is expected to move into the Lesser Antilles and then move to the south of the Dominican Republic and to the south of Haiti. So it is expected to move south of there, and because of that, it will stay mostly over water. So it won't get broken apart by the higher elevations in parts of the Dominican Republic. Those mountains in the Dominican Republic can usually tear some of these storms apart as it moves through there. So the fact that this is moving around there and to the south of there and not really impacting that area is a good sign. Well, it could be a bad sign, meaning that we could have some development or some rather good development with this storm. So we're going to hope probably that this does actually make landfall with the Dominican Republic, because it won't be too strong of a storm by that point. And if it does so, then we leave out the possibility that this becomes a major hurricane. So we're going to hope that this makes landfall earlier rather than later, because if it makes landfall earlier, it has a lesser chance of becoming a stronger storm. So it's kind of the lesser of two evils here. And it would be dangerous if we had maybe a Category 3 storm just rumbling out in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico. So getting a landfall earlier rather than later is probably the best situation or best case scenario here with this type of storm. Taking a look at the amount of ocean heat content in the Atlantic, you can see that especially over this area, over the southern Caribbean, or but pretty much just the entire Caribbean Sea. We have ocean heat content values up near 800 to 140, which is really, really high. And because of that, as Invest 97L moves to the south of there, it's going over a very favorable area of water, especially just to the south of Cuba. And then even if we look at Invest 95L, which is expected to take a track somewhat like this, it's also going over fairly favorable waters. So either way you look at it, we're going over favorable and warm waters, which have a rather high chance of giving these storms a chance to develop. If we look at the actual sea surface temperatures, anywhere in the yellow, oranges, or reds, that's where you're above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is usually the threshold used for these storms. If you're above an 80-degree Fahrenheit threshold for the sea surface temperatures, usually you can have these storms develop. So the entire Caribbean, the entire lower part of the Atlantic basin, and also into the Gulf of Mexico, all have sea surface temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, even closer to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And then again, you get south of Cuba, you get closer to Central America, and you have potentially some sea surface temperatures up near 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are rather warm in these areas, and because of that, as Invest 97L especially moves into these waters, it's going to have a rather good chance of developing here. If we look at the wind shear, this is the only hope, I would say, for these storms to really weaken. We look at this and you can see that we have wind shear values that are going to be quite high. We're looking at 30 or 40 knots here in these areas. So in the reds, that's where we have unfavorable conditions for cyclone formation or intensification, and because of that, it's right over this area, over the Caribbean. That's actually a really good sign, because if we have that right over there, that's one of the only things that can kind of keep these storms and hold them back from really developing. So we have at least one good thing that's coming out of this, that we have a lot of wind shear in this area. So let's hope that that just stays over that same area. If it does, then it can really help rip these storms apart and really help them weaken quite substantially. And if we look at the amount of Saharan dust in the atmosphere, you can see that we have a low amount. It's nothing that's really going to impact this storm too much. It might weaken it slightly, but still, this amount of Saharan dust really is not going to play any role in how strong this storm ends up actually becoming. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.